basic rights were, denied. I think there has to be a better process. I'm not sure what it is. Excuse me. And I'm not saying, like what a lot of people complain about, I'm not saying that the justice system needs to change or the justice system needs to readjust the way it does things. I'm saying once that person is in prison, there has to be a better accountability and a better reason why we let them out or we don't let them out. And I just feel like we should never let them out when they've been convicted and if they go for all of the appeals. There are some people who just don't fool with that. They're just done with it. They do not want to deal with the trial. They don't want to go through it themselves. Perhaps they don't want their own family to have to live through a trial, which is horrible. So those are all things to think about. The judicial system, while I do respect it, absolutely I do. I believe in it. I think that it does protect us, most of us, but there is a growing number of people who are wrongfully convicted. And guess why? It's because of bias. It's because of bias. Whether it's bias by the judge, whether it's bias by the police where they got arrested, it doesn't matter. That bias is what put them in prison. And even perhaps being at the wrong place at the wrong time. But so many people are innocent who are sitting on death row. Or a life in prison. Had to get a drink. All right, so the 15 life sentences were already imposed that rendered further litigation unnecessary, but Shipman became friends with fellow serial killer Peter Moore while in prison. We have not covered Peter Moore. I'm not sure the details on him, but again, I'm going to look that up. I meant to do that already, but I forgot. All right, Peter Moore. Oh, maybe we did. Okay, I think I actually have him. I have him bookmarked because I want to cover him in the next week or so. So this falls at a good time, doesn't it? So Peter Howard Moore, he's also a British serial killer, obviously. He managed cinemas in Bagilt, Holyhead, Kenmare Bay, and Denbigh in North Wales at the time of his arrest. He murdered 4 men in 95, and then due to his attire when committing sexual attacks, he was also called the Man in Black. Not to be confused with Johnny Cash, of course. He also got the life imprisonment, whole life tariff. So that not only was they're killing what they had in common, they got the same sentence too. So, sometimes we mistakenly think that these people go to prison and they sit in their cell and they never talk to anybody and they don't have a life inside the prison, and that is so not true. There's a completely different culture in prison, and yes, they have to learn that culture. There's a hierarchy there, and we see that hierarchy when we're looking at watching movies that are talking about prison. It is not incredibly similar to what we watch on TV. There's always someone fighting. I mean, statistically speaking, someone's always fighting. Someone's always, appealing decisions. There's, really good, really good prisoners who follow the rules and just go about their day-to-day business, don't want to be bothered by anybody. And many serial killers do very well in prison because they are in an environment that is very, very structured, and they take away their choices. So they no longer have choices. Their food and everything is is chosen for them. So interestingly enough, they seem to do better in that kind of structured environment. In early childhood, we know that children thrive in a positive, structured environment. That doesn't mean you don't have fun. It doesn't mean that you don't do things off the cuff, right, and be spontaneous. But what it does mean is they're allowed to operate within these guidelines, within these rules, and they flourish. They do really, really well with that kind of structure. But there are exceptions to that, and those are children with exceptionalities. Doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter where they're at, they always have not an issue, that's not really the right word, but they always have trouble in whatever environment they're in. So there are outliers in this. But a structured facility, it's just to me, very interesting that children really thrive in that structured environment, and serial killers typically strive, really, really they just have a good life in prison with their, and they make friends, and it's their life. They typically get into a routine, and I have heard people say, or not heard them say, I've read that there are people, to get ready and to learn about the cultures in prison before they have to go, those type things. Those people, you have to just about forget the outside world, because your mind you can't be living in the free world when you're in prison where there is no freedom. It'll just about kill you. There's a lot of the mental toll that it takes on people. There's a lot of suicide among serial killers, violent offenders. They can't deal with, their families coming in from the outside. They're not living that life with them. Maybe they have children that they're not seeing anymore. All kinds of things that can be going wrong, and you're almost better off going into the prison and cutting off the family, or limiting your involvement in their life outside of the prison, because you have to live a totally different life to be successful in a prison. And by successful, I mean not get yourself killed. That's just the way it is. If you're a serial killer, if you are a violent offender, you are not put in a prison typically like Martha Stewart or the Chrisleys, even though they don't have air conditioning. To me, that's barbaric, even for prisoners. But and not very smart either, because typically when people are hot, they have a tendency to be angry or get angry quickly. It's like being hangry, right? If you're really starving for food, if you haven't eaten enough during the day, you get hangry. So obviously those are just my opinions. I've not looked at statistics on that, but not that you don't get support from your family outside of prison. You do, but it's very limited. Really, a lot of what you see, like Danny Masterson, who just got convicted of all those rapes 20 years ago, or 2 rapes, I believe it was. The only thing that his family is allowed to do is give him, I want to say $69, maybe $69 a week or a month for that commissary, where he can buy very few things, and he can't have like an excess of funds. That is it. He can do that. That's how much he can spend. Doesn't have to spend that much, and it's like a bank account that they have. But things are expensive, and they're making maybe 10 cents an hour, maybe 25 cents. I'm not sure. It's different everywhere. Every state has different ways. But they're making just paltry money in prison, so their families typically will help them with just their basic needs. And they certainly can't bring them in from the outside. So, So Shipman denied his guilt, disputing the scientific evidence against him. He never made any public statements about his actions, and Shipman's wife Primrose maintained that he was not guilty even after his conviction. That's not surprising. Shipman is the only doctor in the history of British medicine found guilty of murdering his patients. Well, that was then, and this is now. And now we have Lucy Letby, who was convicted of killing her patients. So that's dated information, obviously. I suppose up to this point he was the first one. But I know now he is not. He's not. He's certainly not the only doctor. Maybe doctor. I mean, she was a nurse, healthcare provider. If you wanted to be vague, I guess maybe he is the only doctor. I can't imagine that he is now, though. My goodness. John Bodkin Adams was charged in 1957 with murdering a single patient, and rumors he had killed dozens more over a 10-year period and possibly provided the role model for Shipman. However, he was acquitted and no further charges were pursued. Historian Pamela Cullen has argued that because of Adams' acquittal, there was no impetus to examine asserted flaws in the British legal system until the Shipman case. So what basically Cullen is saying, Adams' acquittal, there was no reason for them to think that the process wasn't working. There was no reason for the court system to see that there were flaws. Nothing up until this point pointed towards there being issues within that judicial system. But when Shipman came along, completely different. Completely different. It changed the way things were handled. It changed the way people were handled. It's powerful what these cases, how they change the world, both good and bad. Maybe we get better clarification on laws and rules and regulations, and maybe those stricter rules help keep these people off the streets. I mean, there's a million scenarios, but there's no way for us to know for sure if what we're doing is the right thing to do, because we treat every case the same and not every person is the same. So for me, you have to have that differentiation. Being an educator, we all have that differentiation. So what might be right for one person who killed someone, maybe it was a teenager who killed their abusive stepfather for continuously raping them. That's different than if that 17-year-old kid would sneak out at night and go to these neighboring apartments and break in and kill women. That's different. There's a motive and an opportunity, and it is in their mindset that they're doing what they're doing so that they can kill someone. Usually when you have these crimes of passion where someone gets killed, like the son or daughter killing the stepfather because they were molesting them, that's a crime of passion, which does not hold the same legal weight as someone who is intentionally set out to kill someone else. It's different. Every case has something different, right? Every case. Every person is different. Everyone's experiences are different. And all we can do is draw these together, examine them, and then make educated decisions about how we envelop everything. How do we encompass everything into, a very short legal description, right? Very difficult. Let's see. So Shipman, he hanged himself in his cell in HM Prison, Wakefield at 6:20 a.m. on January 13th of 2004. Again, common. He was pronounced dead at 8:10. A statement from Her Majesty's Prison Service indicated that he had hanged himself from the window bars of his cell using his bed sheets. After Shipman's death, his body was taken to the mortuary at the Medico-Legal Center in Sheffield by Undertaker's van for a post-mortem examination.